So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us and participating in yet another session in our adaptation webinar series. Since the beginning of May, we've been partnering with nonprofit professionals as well as experts in the field like Peter. We're hoping to help you better equipped with practical tools that you need to not only survive, but also to help you thrive in these challenging times in the new normal. I'm Mel Belko, and I am the Keela's Head of Community Engagement, and I will be the moderator for today's session. But before we get started, I just wanted to go over a couple of housekeeping details with you all. So the first is that this session will be about 30 minutes in length, including about a 10 to 15-minute Q&A session at the end. But we encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. I mean, you can just pop that into the Q&A box or into the chat box, and we will get to them at the end. Today's session will also be recorded, and you will be receiving the recording along with the slide deck, hopefully by the end of today, and if not, for sure by the end of this week if you've missed anything. So not to worry. All right, and now on to the good stuff. I am pleased to introduce to you all Peter Craigen. He is a nonprofit expert and an advisor here at Keela, and he has introduced hundreds of new customers to Keela, and he uses his years of best practice knowledge as well, and in order to ensure success with their experience with Keela. Today he will be leading a session on best practices with Keela, data-driven fundraising, where he will help you unleash your inner data scientist. Thank you so much again, Peter, for joining us. We're so lucky to have you here, and we're excited to jump in. So I'll pass it off to you now to get started.
Thank you so much, Mel. That was a very warm and fantastic introduction. And yeah, it's really, really exciting to see folks from all over joining today. We've got Canada, Atlanta, Georgia, London. I'm seeing Bolivia, Thailand, West Seneca, from Whistler, BC. That's one of my favorite places. And even from India. It's past midnight there. That's incredible. Amazing to see, a worldwide presence here today. And I'm really excited to actually jump right in. Now, before we begin, I do want to acknowledge the territory in which I'm living and presenting on today, which is the unceded territory of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples. I also want to say that, it is an interesting time to be hosting a webinar. With the current situation unfolding worldwide, a global pandemic followed by protests against police brutality, racial injustices. We actually did discuss and considered canceling today's presentation, but ultimately decided against it, really because of the important work that many of you who are joining us are doing to combat racism and inequality. I think that there is a lot that we can all do to help. And if you're looking for specific organizations to support, the Black Visions Collective in Minnesota is a great organization, or if you're looking for someone in Canada, the Black Legal Action Center in Ontario are two organizations doing some incredible work at the heart of these issues. With all that being said, just wanted to say, thank you to everyone. Now, today's webinar is really all about how you can more effectively use your data in Keela. Although data might not be the most exciting or the sexiest topic to discuss on a PowerPoint, today you're going to walk away with a newfound appreciation for using your data to make decisions and to learn new concrete ways of leveraging that information inside Keela. Now, you'll also be empowered to understand your donors and move away from those everyday mundane tasks of things like manually inputting information, really to a new way of focusing specifically on strategy and ultimately focusing more on your mission. So let's actually jump right in. Now, in a recent HubSpot Every Action and Nonprofit Hub report, they surveyed 467 nonprofit professionals and found that while over 90% of respondents reported to collecting data every day, only 6% of those respondents felt that they were effectively using the data at their disposal. And that's something that we want to change. And why might that be? Some of the respondents to that survey cited reasons like not enough time, maybe not enough experience actually using data. Perhaps their data, wasn't necessarily all kept in one place, or they were lacking tools to analyze that data, or simply they weren't collecting enough. And the good news today is that we're going to fix all of that. So let's actually talk about today's themes. We're going to really start by talking about how we can start by collecting clean data, how we can use that clean data to segment and separate out all of this different information, and then ultimately how we can use that to meet your donors and your supporters where they are. And we're going to actually use Keela to show you how we can put all of this into practice. So let's actually, let's take a quick poll before we actually dive right into the system. So if you just want to write in the chat bubble whether you are already a Keela user, whether you are not currently a Keela user, or if you're a consultant or another industry professional or something completely separate, and feel free to provide as much detail as you'd like here. We'd love to get a sense of who we're actually chatting with today. I'll give it a little while we wait for a few entries to roll in. So seeing lots of folks already a Keela user, getting started with Keela, some folks using some other platforms as well. So great to see some Keela customers out there. Hello to everyone who's already a user. We love you all. Welcome, welcome again to the family. But a few folks that aren't necessarily a Keela user. Now today, for all those folks that are already Keela users, I will be demoing our 2.0 platform. We are really, really close to getting everyone migrated over. If you have any questions around the migration to 2.0, feel free to reach out to our customer success team, and we have shared a few timelines as we get things going, but we are so close to getting you over. So consider this like a sneak peek of 2.0. Awesome. So lots of great answers in there. So why don't we actually, more Keela users, amazing. So why don't we actually dive right into Keela? And I'm going to pull open my tab here. So everyone should be looking at Keela on my screen here. And we're going to start by talking about two different ways that we can use Keela to collect clean data. And the first starts with your contacts. We're going to look at how we can merge two contacts in Keela to maintain clean records and avoid any duplicates. This is going to help when you pull donor records, reports, and it even keeps your subscription costs down, although don't tell my boss that I told you that. So let's look at merging. Now, when you import data into Keela, you will be prompted for some duplicate checking to go on. So if you've already done that step, it's possible though that something may have made it through, or perhaps you've entered in some contacts that didn't necessarily match up. And if you ever notice that there are two contacts or you see two duplicate records, you can manually merge these contacts very, very easily. So the first thing you want to do is select the two contacts here. Here, I'm actually going to turn my little spotlight on so you might be able to see my mouse a little bit better. Can everyone see that? That should be a little better. So the first thing we'll do, we'll select those two contacts here, and then we'll go up to Actions, and we're going to hit Merge. This allows us to bring the two contact profiles into one. Now, you'll want to select which of these contacts is going to be the primary. So you can select, based on this little crown icon here, which contact is going to remain with all of their contact fields. In this one, I see that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has a little bit more info. They've got a few extra tags in there. And so I'm going to select them as the primary, and I'm going to merge these two contacts together into one. Once I merge them, I now have a single contact record. This is going to clean up things like your reports. If you run a report that says how many donors gave in a certain date range, instead of showing two, it's only going to show one. And it will also merge all of the prior giving history of those contacts onto a single profile. So that's step one, maintaining clean data by merging any duplicate contacts in the system. That's something that you or your team members might want to have in your back pocket as you're walking through the system, as you're doing searches. It's a good practice to always make sure that you are merging contacts to keep those duplicates down. Now, The second way to maintain clean data in Keela is actually to use Keela's Forms functionality. So navigate over to Forms. If you haven't already seen the webinar from yesterday, my colleague Deepak Sekri went over some wonderful examples on best practices using Keela's donation forms. Mel, if you could maybe leave a little link in the chat of where you can find the recording of that webinar. You'll also find all of our previous webinars on our website, keela.co/webinars. Might be a few days until those ones are up there, but for now, if you can pop a link in with Deepak's webinar, it's a fantastic walkthrough on best practices using our donation forms. Now, forms keep your data clean by doing a number of different things. And I'll navigate over to an example of a website donation form. And we can look at the designer here. Firstly, all of our addresses that are captured in a form, whether it is a donation form or whether it is a subscription form or a volunteer form, are going to be validated by Google's address database. It's easily one of the most comprehensive databases in the world, and it means smooth and easy data entry for the donors or supporters, but it also eliminates any possibility of human error. So when I start typing this out, here's our office address here. If anyone does want to come visit when this whole thing's over, when I start typing in our address, it will populate the city, the zip or postal code, the province or state, as well as the country. And there are also a lot of other fields that you collect on something as simple as a form. Things like first name, last name. Oh, if I can spell my own last name, we'll get there. And email. There we go. Again, no one can spell on camera, I promise. So things like that, first name, last name, email, physical address, donation date, and donation amount are all being captured cleanly and entered automatically into the system. There's no manual entry here, and there's no room for human error when this data is put right into the tool. Now, indirectly, you're also capturing a number of different fields that you can use to segment and separate your data. Things like payment method, or if you've opted for any impact areas on your form, or if this form is part of a particular campaign. You'll even see whether or not someone chose to cover the processing fee. And these are all great data points that you can use to target your communications and reporting. So to recap, we can keep clean data by capturing all this information in a standardized way using Keela's forms. That eliminates any manual entry and make sure that you pull that data into the database. As we all know, I'm sure you've heard before, garbage in, garbage out. So let's keep the data going in as clean as possible. Now, once you've got some clean data, that brings us right into segmentation. And data is really the core of our system, and I promised you that I would empower you to leverage your data to really better understand your donors and to make strategic decisions. And so let's look at one easy way that we can use this data to influence our fundraising strategy. And the easiest way to segment this info is by using the filters feature in Keela. So filters, you'll see that pretty much on a number of different screens. You'll see it on contacts, you'll see it on reports, you'll see it in a few other features as well. But filters allow us to narrow down our overall data set until we're looking at the information that we want to act on. So I'll open up the filters here and you can hit edit filters. And I promise I'm not going to take you through every single one, step by step here. But I do recommend, if you're already a Keela user, get familiar with a few of these filters and really understand how some of these data points are captured and how you can use them to display the info that you're looking for. If you have any questions on some of these filters, feel free to reach out to our success team. They are wonderful, wonderful humans, and they would be more than happy to help. But let's take an example of donors. And let's look at donors who gave within a certain time period. So we're making use of all the donation data that's already been entered into Keela and the date in which it was entered. So I will choose donation transactions, and I will choose date received is, and I can choose last year or this year, and I can continue to stack up these filters. You can try experimenting with additional filters, really to see what lists might be most practical for you to use in Keela. And once you've actually segmented your data, the next thing that you're going to want to do is to meet your donors where they are. So once we've segmented that data, what I mean by that, meeting donors where they are, I mean that when it comes to using different communication channels or asking specific amounts, you want to reflect who your supporters really are. For example, if you have an older generation that supports you, you probably don't want to be sending them Venmo requests or posting on Instagram asking them for donations. That much is obvious. But you might actually be surprised, and you can take these things a step further. The data is here really to ensure that you're not blasting your major donors with solicitation emails, or to ensure that your online donors are receiving online communications. But before you blow that off as really obvious, you might want to actually compare against the data that you have in here to really compare against that gut feeling that you might already have. You might be surprised to see how many folks are donating via the payment methods online versus cash or check, or how many younger demographics you have, or how many folks you have within a specific region. So try and use this data against some of those gut feelings to really prove whether or not you might be right there. Now, let's talk about two examples how we can meet our donors where they are and how you can do this practically in Keela, but please feel free to get creative here. So let's imagine that we pull up a filter showing donors who gave via online methods. So I'll choose the payment method, contains any of, I'll say online via Stripe, and PayPal. Really depends on where you keep your data in there. Now, this data set can be extremely useful in deciding how best to reach these donors in your next campaign. And you could do the opposite. You could filter by everyone that did not give online, and those are the folks that might be most likely to respond to a direct mail campaign. Obviously, those online donors, like myself, tend to be a lot more active online, where offline donors might respond a lot better to that direct mail. And so now we want to use this data to inform our communication strategy. So let's add this filter and see what we get. We've got 104 contacts. So with our communication strategy, perhaps all of your online donors, this list of 104, might want a series of 5 emails, and your offline donors might be best with some direct mail. That part is ultimately up to you. But before we actually jump into the email blasts and send them out something, we're going to show you a new feature within Keela that actually uses machine learning to meet your donors where they are. So let's actually navigate back into forms, and we're going to choose a form. Let's go back to that website donation form, and the feature that I want to show you is called Smart Ask. Smart Ask will populate your donation ask amounts based on the donor's previous giving history. So if everyone can see that here, you'll find it under Forms. Click on a specific form, underneath Setup, and underneath that Organize By section, you'll notice that you can organize the ask amounts on your form by donation tiers, like specific dollar amounts, impact areas, if you have specific programs or areas where donors can designate their funds, or with Smart Ask. So Smart Ask pre-fills the forms based on a contact's previous giving history. And you'll notice there is a little recommendation to enable the custom donation amount. Where do we find that? Right here. That way, the donor has the option to put in a custom amount, just in case that suggested amount doesn't necessarily line up. So once we've actually selected Smart Ask, when I go ahead and send out an email blast using this form, Keela knows exactly what the giving history of each of those contacts has been. So it's able to ask a specific amount. So let's go back into contacts here and let's take a look at my own contact here and look at what Smart Ask might say would be a good donation ask amount. So overall, Smart Ask says this contact is most likely to donate between $220 and $290. And they make the recommendation for asking $250. Now, of course, this machine learning is never going to replace human intuition. However, when it comes to something as simple as like a mass email campaign, it can certainly be a great place to start. So when I go into my email blasts and I go to send out a test, I sent out a test email to myself here, we can actually see exactly, I'll go to the recipients here and let's take a look at Peter. When I look at that interaction, when Peter clicks on this donation button all the way at the bottom there, he's going to actually see these suggested amounts. And so this is the email that I pulled up, and it's suggesting between $220 and $290. And so because Keela understands the previous giving history of the donor, it's able to suggest and meet your donor where they are. And that's everything that we have today in terms of Keela. So first off, there you have it. Using Keela, we can then maintain clean data by collecting clean information with forms and with your contact management. We can use our filters to segment and separate our lists. And we can also use that Keela eBlast tool and features like Smart Ask ultimately to meet our donors where they are. Great job, you rock. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who joined today. The work that you are doing is critical and we really appreciate you. I hope this webinar was insightful and provided some practical steps to how Keela can help your organization be a little more driven by data. We will follow up with an email of my slides and the recording of this session. And Mel and Sam, I wanted to really thank you for organizing this whole webinar, and I will pass it off to you to lead us out.
Well, thanks. Yeah, let's see if anyone has any questions before we sign off. I'm sure some of you do. We have had a couple of questions coming in, just asking if Peter was using Keela 2.0, and yes, he is. He's using the new version of Keela. So if you purchase before January 22nd of this year, you will most likely be using our older version, but we're working as hard as we can to get you migrated over to Keela 2.0 and what Peter just showed you. So stay tuned for that. And this is kind of a sneak peek for you all. And while you are all popping your questions into the chat or in the Q&A box, I just wanted to let you know that our next session and final session of this series will be next Tuesday. So that's June 9th. At 11 a.m. PST or 2 p.m. EST. And this session will be led by the CEO of Wild Women Fundraising, Mazarine Trays. And she'll be presenting her session titled Secrets of Successful Virtual Fundraising. If you haven't already registered for that, I believe Sam just plopped it into the chat box there if you want to sign up for that one. Again, that is our last session of the series. All right, and I do see that we have just a couple questions coming in. So the first is coming from Tara, and they're asking, can you explain where Keela gets that Smart Ask amount? The reason I ask is that we just started with Keela and it's recommending about $220 for all of our donors, most of whom we don't have any donations from yet.
Yeah, happy to answer that one. Tara, that's a fantastic question. And am I supposed to type it out?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay. So our nonprofit intelligence team who built the Smart Ask functionality and who builds all of our machine learning algorithms and some of the AI built right into our tool, has developed Smart Ask not only based on just previous giving history, but they also pull from data sets, from a lot of large data sets to understand things like average giving trends per country, time of year, based on specific GDPs of countries. They've really taken data from as many places as they can. And so things like an average gift size by someone in North America might influence what the Smart Ask feature will suggest to you, especially if you don't have a whole lot of data in the system. Now, that being said, the more data you can provide to the tool, the more accurate those ask amounts will get. So take it with a grain of salt. If you don't necessarily have a whole lot of data on an individual or even on a whole list of contacts, maybe Smart Ask isn't a tool you want to be using right away. Maybe wait till you've built up, a year of campaigns before you start to rely too heavily on those suggestions. As I mentioned, that type of human intuition is never going to be replaced by, a feature like Smart Ask. But ultimately, we pull from a number of different sources that provide us things like, average donation amounts for individual donors in a certain geographical region. And that's probably where you're getting that 220 suggested number, even if there's no data in there. So hopefully that's a helpful answer for now. Looking forward to seeing that suggested ask amount hopefully go up a little bit once you get some data in there.
Awesome, thank you, Peter. We have another question. Can you make the monthly, I'm guessing they're talking about in the donation form itself, the default? And then they're also asking, can you change the donation amounts in the form?
You can. So that's a great question. I won't dive too deeply into that right now, but just as a quick note, seeing as you will get this recording, when you're on a donation form here, under the Setup tab, you can choose all of these settings. So donation amounts, you can choose if it's one-time or recurring, or you can make the default one-time, or you can make the default recurring. And same thing with donation amounts. If you hit the Organize By tab, if you hit Smart Ask, it will pre-fill the form with those Smart Ask amounts. But if you choose something like donation tiers, you can edit exactly what donation amounts you have in there. So you could say 2,500. And same thing with impact areas. If you have the ability for donors to designate their funds, when you actually put in a specific impact area, you get to choose what those specific amounts are. And you can even write a description of what they would get you as well. So underneath that Setup tab, on the actual donation form, that's where you'll find the ability to change both the default for recurring as well as any of those ask amounts.
Perfect. Thanks, Peter. I actually don't see any more questions in here, which I guess is maybe a good thing. Maybe that means that you were very thorough with everything that you had talked about. But if anyone does have any lingering questions or if anything comes up, please feel free to reach out to any of us, especially our customer success team. If you're a Keela customer or our sales team, if you're not, we would love to help you out and answer any questions that you have. Again, just a reminder that the session today is recorded, so you will receive the recording along with the slide deck by the end of today. And don't forget about our last session next week. And with that, I think we'll close it off. I don't see any more questions coming in, but you all have been lovely throughout this webinar series, and Peter's giving his love to everyone. Thank you again so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.